And we are live. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for being with us today on this third RexCast centering on the crisis in the Ukraine. Today, again, we have our friend Michael and our special guest, George. Michael, first of all, would you like to introduce yourself to some of those that might not know you from previous?
Yeah, so I guess if people haven't watched the past couple days, I'm Michael. Friend of Felix's, been helping him out with a couple streams, especially trying to give a bit more context in the wider geopolitics, a bit of the history, and to a degree the tactical situation on the ground in Ukraine as it happens and develops as we go on.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. And also, we do have today an announcement that you do have an Instagram. Oh, sorry, not an Instagram, a Telegram channel.
Yeah.
Would you like to spam that a little bit?
Yes. So the past couple of days, for people who haven't been watching, I have been uploading basically the latest footage out of Ukraine onto my Instagram, but Instagram stories are not really the best way to go about it. So I have set up a Telegram group, which let's have a look. Where is it? Which I am uploading full-length videos of stuff as I get it, the sources where I get it from, and every now and again just giving a bit my own personal spiel of how I think the tactical situation is developing on the ground. So where has it gone? There it is there. So if anyone's interested in keeping it up to date to me, it is t.me/mdelabrox. And I will pass this to Felix to post in chat, and I'll try and post it myself.
All right, sounds good. I'll do that right now. George, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I did a couple of live streams with Felix. What was that, back in October?
Yeah, October and November, I think. I was in Croatia at that time, as I remember.
I've been a security contractor in Iraq since the beginning of 2010. Then just kind of stayed overseas for the rest of the 11 years. So I worked in Iraq and Afghanistan. As a security contractor, I worked in operation centers, and I did atmospherics intelligence for a little while.
And
I've been tracking. I've done a number of long-term projection analysis reports. So I've been tracking pipelines and the movement of Iran and China trying to skirt U.S. sanctions. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
All right, excellent. So we're here today, obviously we're here today to talk about the situation in the Ukraine, or in Ukraine. I'm trying to get my vocabulary around that. I think there's a lot of people that have been using the word "the" in front of Ukraine, similar to, I would imagine, the Levant and I don't know, places like that. I think the Lebanon used to be the moniker for that country, but we're going to be talking about that first and foremost. Let's get a picture of what's going on here. Michael, do you want to give us any updates as we go on? So before we get on to other issues, any large updates from yesterday?
A quick update for those who have been watching us since the first day of the invasion. We were obviously a bit wrong on the first day because the first day and the Russians appear themselves. We didn't have much confidence in the Ukrainian army. The Russians were obviously overconfident themselves. However, on the first day of the invasion is that Ukrainian resistance did solidify quite strongly in certain parts of the country. Lead elements of the Russian invasion appear to, again, being overconfident, advanced too far, too fast, got themselves cut off. Some of them got destroyed. Others have been captured. So that kind of threw a spanner into the works of the Russian plans on day one. Yesterday, the Russians clearly adapted very quickly to the situation. So the first day, the Ukrainians gave a very good account of themselves. Yesterday, it was a very bad day for the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainians are still resisting quite strongly in the Donbass and in the Kharkiv area. However, across the rest of the country, the Ukrainians have taken significant material losses. In the south, the Russians are rapidly advancing out of the Crimea into Kherson Oblast and towards Zaporozhye and Dnipro. Again, forgive my pronunciation. I'm not a Ukrainian or a Russian speaker, so my pronunciation might be horrific, but I'll try my best. So, and in the north, on the first day, Russian elite VDV, the VDV is the Russian Airborne, they launched a helicopter-borne assault on an airbase outside of Kiev called Hostomel or Gostomel, depending if you take the Russian or Ukrainian pronunciation of it. That's where the Antonov factory works are. So if anyone knows of the world's largest airplane, that's where it's based. That's actually on the airbase at the moment. That's where it's made. That's where Antonov has its works. The VDV took over the airbase. They've held the airbase. The Ukrainians throughout the first day put up a strong resistance and tried to push the VDV out of the airbase. Several times they said they destroyed the Russian incursion. That did not turn out is what the Ukrainians said. The Ukrainians were able to prevent the Russians from landing fixed-wing aircraft on that airbase to set up an airhead just north of Kiev, but they were not able to defeat the VDV forces on the airbase. So that was where the Ukrainians scored a sort of victory in that they prevented the Russians from having a direct airbase on outside Kiev. Day two, from my understanding, from what I've seen, is a Russian helicopter armada of Ka-52s and Hind gunships came out of the north from Chernobyl, where a large Russian ground invasion began, and basically broke the back of the Ukrainian army to the north of Kiev. They plowed straight into the Ukrainian offensive on Hostomel airport, and they wiped it out. And then the Ukrainian land invasion is from Chernobyl has just advanced pretty much headlong into Ukrainian military columns, surprised them and wiped them out. So the Ukrainian army, its ability to defend the north of Kiev was completely broken yesterday. And since then, the Russians have slowly infiltrated into Kiev proper, into the urban areas of the city. There's been fighting overnight, but it hasn't been a massive advance. They've just slowly infiltrated into the city. However, in the open country to the west of Kiev, the Russians have just completely overrun it. All train and road net links to the west of Kiev, to western Ukraine, to Poland, to the out of Kiev are basically cut. That appears to be in Russian hands at this stage. So Kiev is looking to, if it's not already, because they're still fighting at a Ukrainian Air Force base to the south of the city. That's hotly contested at the moment. But it looks like to the west, Kiev is being completely cut off. So this now leaves the east to the city. Further to the east, you've got a large Russian invasion advance party coming out of Chernigov Oblast. How long it'll take them to get to Kiev and completely surround the city could be today, could be the next couple days. It depends how effective and how much resistance the Ukrainian army is able to muster. But at the moment, after yesterday, it does look like the Ukrainian army is in disarray across most of the country. But saying that, they have inflicted some losses on the Russians. There is videos of Russian casualties and destroyed Russian equipment out there, but they have not really been able to hold back any of the significant Russian advances out of Kharkiv. Kharkiv has been under heavy attack since day one, so we're into day 3 of it. The Ukrainian army there seems to be giving a very good account of itself. It's held back the Russian attack on the city. It appears to have even pushed them back out of the city, because on day 1, if you watched our streams, the Russians had gone into the Kharkiv proper. Now it appears the Ukrainian army has pushed them back out of the city. But the problem is if Kiev falls and if the southern Russian advance out of Crimea reaches Dnipro, all the Ukrainian armed forces in the east of Ukraine, in Kharkiv, in Chernigov, in the Donbass, they will be cut off from the rest of Ukraine proper. And it's a very bleak situation for the Ukrainians as it stands. But saying that, the first day we said it looked bleak for the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians were able to put up a very good fight. Yesterday was not a good day for them. But the next, like I say, maybe the Ukrainians are able to pull some rabbits out of the hat. But at the moment, it's not looking very good for them.
What's your assessment on the this day's events, George?
Oh, I I was just gonna let Michael discuss that because I was going to talk about other things.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to you in a second then, George. Michael, with regards to one story that we were talking about yesterday, and it was one on an island quite near Romania called Snake Island. I don't know how to pronounce the Ukrainian name for it, but there was a story that has come out where yesterday the story was that the Russian Navy arrived and told them that they had to surrender, and their last broadcast was "F you" to the Russian Navy, and supposedly the Russian Navy obliterated the island. But I've also heard stories coming out that that's actually a false story. Have you heard anything about that?
There's misinformation on all sides. The Ukrainians are playing up propaganda. The Russians are playing up their own propaganda. So at the moment, we can't really confirm one way or the other. There was clearly some fighting on Snake Island. That did happen. The outcome of that, it depends if you take the Ukrainian or the Russian narrative at the moment. Because this morning, the Russians, pro-Russian Telegram groups have been putting up footage of what they claim is Ukrainian soldiers that surrendered to them on Snake Island being dropped off in Crimea and being taken into captivity. That's what the Russians are putting out. That could very well be Russian propaganda, but that's what the Russians are saying. The Ukrainians are saying that there was a heroic last stand. What has happened in actuality, we're probably not going to get a confirmation one way or the other until we start getting decent footage or casualty lists or something of that regard. But Snake Island, for anyone who doesn't know, it's to the south of Odessa. It's a small island near the coast of Romania. It kind of guards, I don't know if guard would be the correct term, but basically the Russians took it because they want to have complete naval control over Ukrainian waters, and that kind of guards the southern flank. That then leads into Odessa. What's happening in Odessa is interesting. Off the coast of Odessa, for the past couple of days, there's been a lot of talk, and it's almost certainly true, is that there is a large and growing Russian amphibious unit off the coast, waiting at a moment's notice to basically launch an amphibious assault into Odessa city. So there's quite a lot of Ukrainian military units in Odessa that's prepared to counter that. If the Russians do attack it, it will be a quite bloody naval invasion, or it could just be the Russians keeping troops there to tie down Ukrainian army units in Odessa to prevent them from going out and fighting elsewhere in the country. Because Felix, if you want to go a bit more along the coast towards Ukraine proper, to the north and east, the Russians are quite rapidly advancing out of Kherson Oblast to such an extent that some of these rivers, if you can see on these rivers along the coast, the Ukrainians have been destroying bridges across the river to try and slow the Russian advance. So from my understanding is that Russian ground forces have been engaged in fighting in Nikolaev. Again, depends if you take the Russian or the Ukrainian pronunciation of it, but that's a major Ukrainian air base. The Russians are apparently engaged in fighting there, and that's very close to Odessa Oblast. The thing about Odessa Oblast is it borders Transnistria, which is a breakaway republic of Moldova. In Transnistria, there is another Russian army group that is there for peacekeeping, quote unquote. So if the Russians are able to link up, they haven't attacked out of Transnistria because they probably know that they can't really hold if they were to go on offensive operations so far behind enemy lines. But if the Russians are able to form a land bridge with Transnistria, that will then almost certainly bring another Russian army group into the fight, and that's quite far into Ukraine proper, into Western Ukraine.
Well, there's been a lot of updates on this. There's also, just as a side note, there's coming along with this is obviously the repercussions that are coming out of Western countries punishing. We talked a little bit yesterday about the sanctions, but there's also now talk of not the United States, but other countries trying to work through the SWIFT system to cut the country of Russia off from the global banking system. And I'm reading right now that Facebook has banned Russian state media, and I believe Google, Facebook, there's a whole bunch of tech censorship that's coming in on this. And so there's quite a lot of repercussions that are going forward on this. Twitter has just announced a new policy on Russia and Ukraine, and it's just more censorship. George, what would you like to contribute something so far insofar as the political aspects of this?
Well, what I've been writing about, in my LinkedIn articles was, this has been brewing for a long time, because the original agreement between Baker and Gorbachev was that the United States wouldn't move 1 inch eastward with NATO. That lasted, through Reagan and Bush 43 to the first term of Clinton. And then it seemed to change after in the Clinton second term. Then, of course, Bush 43 started putting the missiles in Poland. Well, Czechoslovakia and or Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland. And the Obama administration started putting emphasis on in Ukraine. So this creeping of NATO has changed the policy, because it was right now the mainstream media is focusing on, the expansion of NATO. NATO can expand as far as they want, but the alternative would have been the Intramurium strategy of expanding the neutral zone from Switzerland and Austria, and economically developing Poland and Ukraine, and of course Hungary and Slovakia and Czech. So they would be an independent buffer between.
Are you still there, George?
He's still there, George. Yeah,
Nope.
well, maybe he's having some sort of computer problems.
Okay, well, while we get him back on, I've just been posting in my Telegram group. There's, the Russians are claiming that the defenders of Snake Island have surrendered to them. They've got footage of what looks to be Ukrainian troops coming off some kind of vessel, picking up water bottles, and then they've got another post of them in a bus, quite clearly Ukrainian troops, and they're saying that there was 83 of them, whereas the Ukrainians claimed that there was 13 defenders on the island and all of them were killed. So that's what the Russians are saying in regards to Snake Island. Well, as you sort out with George, I'll just keep an overlay of the entire situation.
Please, yeah. I'm just trying to get him back.
So, yes. So as I was saying, chat, that's the situation in Snake Island as far as we can tell, at least from the Russian perspective. This morning, there's been quite significant Russian missile strikes on Kiev. The one that you're almost certainly going to be seeing across the media as the day goes on is that a Russian cruise missile seems to have fallen short of the airport and hit a civilian apartment block in quite spectacular fashion. The footage that's coming out of it you see the entire thing in the aftermath. So that's going to be doing the rounds of the news throughout the day, that strike. Do I think that the Russians intentionally hit a residential block? No. Just behind the residential area is Kiev International Airport, and the Russians have been hitting that all morning. So almost certainly this missile, as tragic as it is, and while it shouldn't have happened to begin with, is that this missile was programmed wrong and it fell short and hit this residential area, and it's caused quite a bit of damage. And seeing the damage it's done to the area, almost certainly there's going to be civilian casualties on the ground. So as the Russians continue to put air strikes and missile strikes into Kiev throughout the morning, earlier in the morning, there was also more signs that the Russians were preparing another helicopter-borne attack somewhere in the western, maybe eastern Kiev area. Across the north of Kiev, there is a town/city called, again, forgive my pronunciation if it's horrific, but I believe it's pronounced like Bucha. Bucha. That was a site of fighting yesterday whenever the Russian army advanced and surprised the Ukrainian column and took it out. in that area this morning, there was quite a lot of Russian Ka-52 and Hind gunships seen flying in the vicinity. So it looks like the Russians are preparing for another helicopter-borne assault somewhere in the Kiev area. So throughout the day, as the Russians build up their forces, we're probably going to be witnessing the start of the Battle of Kiev, the serious Battle of Kiev. Either the Russians go in and try and take the city by force, which would be very brutal, or they're going to try. Or they're going to try and encircle the city. Overnight, quite disturbingly, because this never ends well in history, is the Ukrainians have felt that they're in such a position that they've thrown open the armories in Kiev and thrown guns out to basically any civilian willing to ask for them. So throughout the night, there's been several videos coming out. Again, if you're keeping tabs in my Telegram group, I've posted some footage of it and reports of it. Throughout the morning, there's been cases of Ukrainian civilians who've now gotten rifles shooting each other or shooting fleeing civilians, because there's a massive paranoia in the city at the moment over Russian saboteurs. So there has been civilian casualties where civilians have been shooting other civilians because they fear that they're Russian saboteurs acting in the city. The Russians are playing this up to their advantage because Telegram is the big social media in these countries. So Russian Telegram accounts are going into Ukrainian groups and playing up the idea that there are Russian saboteurs basically running amok in the city, and that's causing panic and disorder within Kiev as well. And it's to disrupt the Ukrainian ability to defend the city. There've been some small cases of looting as well in Kiev, but by and large, it does seem that the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian state is keeping relative control of the city proper. The Ukrainian President Zelensky is refusing to leave the city. Whatever your political views of the man, you have to give him his due. This is a national leader who's refusing to leave his capital while it's under direct assault. So he is saying he's going to make his stand in the city, alongside Vitaly Klitschko. If anyone's familiar with the big famous Ukrainian boxer, he's actually the mayor of Kiev. Yesterday, he took up arms and he says that he will fight to defend the city. So if the Russians go into Kiev, it is going to be brutal and it is going to be bloody. So what the Russians could do instead is just encircle the city and try and starve it out, although that has its own grim implications in of itself. But either way, as the day goes on, we'll start to get an idea of how the Russian offensive on Kiev is going to develop.
It's almost like if they did something like a blockade, as you said, or a siege of the city, it would almost be like Sarajevo 2.0. And as everyone knew, that didn't turn out very well for that city during the
it would not be, especially, well, I don't really think Russia cares about global public opinion, but if there's signs of famine in the city, it will not go well. So have you been able to reestablish contact with George? Or
I believe so. He said he got.
Yeah, I'm back on.
Okay. Great. Yeah.
My
somehow.
internet must have, my internet just dropped or something.
Okay, well, you're back, so that's all that's important. So you were talking about NATO expansion, George?
Yeah, I'm not sure when the internet dropped, but the topic was the United States was the original agreement between Baker and Gorbachev was that NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward. And then in the second term of Clinton, they started expanding one country after another till Bush 43 started putting missiles in Poland, and then that started. That's when Putin started pushing back. He made that speech in 2007 at the Munich G20 conference that NATO shouldn't expand eastward. Then the Obama administration, they started moving into Ukraine, started taking a lot of interest in Ukraine. The problem is it's so close to the Caucasus where the Russians have their oil and natural gas reserves and pipelines and everything like that, that if you combine the movement into Ukraine combined with the Baltic countries becoming NATO members, then all of a sudden you have an existential threat to Russia, where you can cut off the port at St. Petersburg and cut off their access, in the Mediterranean and the Caspian for them to ship their oil. So, because the reason why I bring this up is because there's what the mainstream media has been leaving out, and what Professor Mearsheimer in his 2015 lecture and Vladimir Posner at his lecture in Yale in September of 2018 was they want to add back that the NATO and the United States could have adopted of politically and economically developing, the neutral zone of Central and Eastern Europe, what I call the Intramurium Plan, because Pilsudski after World War I was advocated that Poland and Ukraine merge and connect the Baltic to the Baltic and the Black Seas together to form a buffer between Western Europe and Russia, so they wouldn't keep on getting overrun by armies going back and forth. So that was the original Baker and Gorbachev agreement back in the early 90s.
I believe you're talking about James Baker, the Secretary of State at the time, correct?
Oh, correct.
Sorry, some people might not be aware who Baker is. James Baker was the Secretary of State at the time, the U.S. Secretary of State.
Right. He was the Secretary of the Treasury under Reagan, and then under Bush 41, he became the Secretary of State. So he had, he'd been in that job for 12 years, or had been in national foreign policy for a long time. So, it's this NATO mission creep that has been driving the movement eastward. Because NATO's kind of, after the Cold War ended, it didn't really have a mission other than just, keep on going eastward, which would be what their bureaucratic, inclination would be, until they've made Putin feel like he's backed into a corner. I think Michael was talking about that in his live stream, in his past two live streams. So I'm just kind of reinterjecting that NATO could have reversed course, but they keep on pushing farther and farther eastward till Russia did something. Now, I didn't think Russia was going to make this big of an operation in Ukraine. I'm totally surprised by the scale of the operation, because it doesn't seem to be sustainable. The longer that Russia stays in Ukraine, the more it turns into an occupation and a insurgency, counterinsurgency war starts. Russia can't sustain that. They don't have enough people. It takes too much manpower. So, and their economy is only as big as Mexico's ultimately. So I don't really see where they're going with that. What Professor Mearsheimer talked about in 2015 was he did expect a Russian invasion of Ukraine, but he expected a quick invasion with a quick exit strategy. But the longer, the scale of this operation means that, or it looks like right now that that a pullback by Russia doesn't seem going to be like a victory and an exit strategy. It's going to look more like a defeat. So I don't understand where Putin is going with this.
It looks like, in my opinion, the scale of the invasion has kind of struck me. But it looks to me like the Russians are looking to establish a new government in Ukraine. They'll probably keep some forces in Ukraine, but hopefully they're hoping that, I would imagine that in the Russian estimation, is that they're able to hold down this new proxy Ukrainian state if they can mobilize the Russophone and Russophile populations of Ukraine to hold it down under their own ability. So in the way that since 2014, Ukraine has been dominated by the Western Ukrainians, is I would imagine the Russians are hoping that this new hypothetical Ukrainian client state can be held down by Eastern, what they would hope to be is more pro-Russian Eastern Ukrainians. But I mean, just to go over the invasion, it seems to have been quite sclerotic in certain points. I don't know if this was by design or if certain Russian troops weren't as organized as they hoped, but certain different parts of the country were attacked at different times instead of one coordinated offensive. There was sort of different attacks in on parts of the country at different periods. A lot on the first day, some more on the second day. Maybe that was because they were hoping that would draw off Ukrainian troops from one part to another. But the other thing I kind of wrote it off yesterday whenever I seen it, but there's been more and more videos that have come out of it of Russians that have either been captured by the Ukrainians, or there's been a couple of videos. Again, if you look through my Telegram, they're somewhere up there, where, well, I guess you'd have to speak Russian to understand it, but where Russian soldiers are being spoken to by Ukrainian civilians. And the narrative that's come out of these videos that I've seen is that a lot of the Russian troops seem to have been told on the day of the invasion that they were going on an exercise, that they were going out on training operations, and that they only sort of realized is that they were engaged in the invasion is whenever they crossed the border. So that's quite interesting. So, like I say, some of the Russian troops seem to be a bit. That's not to say that they're not going to fight, because they have been fighting and they have been fighting well. But it's a bit strange for Russian commanders to tell their troops, and this isn't all the troops. The VDV almost certainly knew exactly, like the elite Russian troops, the professional Russian army probably were well aware of what they were getting into. But some of these second line units, like I say, the ones that are being captured or speaking to Ukrainian civilians, they're saying that they've been told on the day of the invasion, we're going out on exercises, and then they ended up in Ukraine in a firefight. So that's a very interesting aspect of it. So quite how Putin plans to rectify that, because again, I'm lay my bias open. I am sympathetic to the Russian geostrategic position, but I'm very sympathetic to the Ukrainians because it is their homeland that is under attack. But even saying that, there is a lot of discontent in Russia over this, to such an extent. Apparently today, from what I've seen, is Russian news aren't even talking about it anymore. This wasn't reported on most Russian news networks. They're just
internal Russian news, not like Russian RT news, for example.
Yeah. Internal Russian news, from my understanding, from what I've seen, are just talking about local traffic reports around Moscow and stuff like that. They're not talking about the invasion. So they were talking about it yesterday and the day before. So there's something very interesting going on in Russia at the moment. But a lot of Russians, there have been protests. They haven't been mass protests, but you can bet that a lot of Russians feel a lot of unease over this. Because just to give a quick example of this, the second largest minority in Russia is Ukrainians. Many Russians have family, they have friends in Ukraine, they have history in Ukraine. They have a lot of them have almost certainly been to Ukraine at some point. So the fact that they have now found themselves at war with a country that they feel very close to, like I say, the term I keep coming up with is like, these are brother peoples. This is like the Welsh, the English, and the Scots fighting wars amongst each other. So must be very mixed feelings in Russia at the moment amongst the population.
What about news that's coming out that there's going to be 10,000 or more Chechen fighters being sent to the Ukraine to work alongside Russia?
That's very disturbing. If there is something, see, the problem is Ramzan Kadyrov, basically the bandit king of Chechnya. He's constantly making stuff like this. He's very much a showman. But there undoubtedly will be Chechens heading into the conflict. Is it going to be the thousands that he had videos of yesterday forming up in ranks in Grozny is another question. But I mean, I would imagine most of the chat would, if they don't understand the implications of it, I think they would probably at least understand that Chechens are very brutal. They do not fight wars like civilized men, let's put it that way. And Ramzan Kadyrov, he was bragging that he has put out bounties on Ukrainian soldiers that Chechens kill. So that's
Sorry,
if they do enter the battle.
Can you repeat that, please? The bounty part?
Yeah, so apparently is Ramzan Kadyrov is offering $5,000 for every national battalion. The national battalions are like the Ukrainian nationalists who formed National Guard battalions. So this is as we were talking about yesterday, the quote-unquote Nazis in Azov and Agadir, those sort of battalions. Is Ramzan Kadyrov has said for every one that a Chechen fighter kills, he will pay them $5,000. He's also offered things like $30,000 for each tank that a Chechen can destroy. Now, this also leads into other interesting aspects because over the past day, Chechen diaspora, so these are Chechens who live outside Russia who fled because of the Chechen wars and for other issues. They're telling each other that they need to go to Ukraine to fight for the Ukrainians, to fight the Kadyrovites being the pro-Russian Chechens. So if this goes on long enough, is we could end up with a Chechen civil war in the middle of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But as I say, maybe I'm bigoted, maybe I'm Chechenophobic, but Chechens, whenever they go into war, the local civilian population never comes out well of it.
Yeah,
I've
heard only that.
Yeah. How much the Russians can keep them in control if they do go into the fight, especially if Kadyrov's offering bounties on how many people they kill. Like I say, this could all be bluster. This could be Kadyrov being another showmanship that he's very famous for. But if there is something to it, I mean, if this war goes on for a significant scale and the Chechens really do live up to what they're claiming they're going to do, it's not going to be pretty.
Just a quick shout out to Keegan the Great. He says, I'm an American expat in Bulgaria. My wife is getting freaked out and we're making an emergency plan. I'd rather stick it out. It's a nothing burger. Well, safety to you, sir. And I hope you and your wife don't get caught up in this conflagration. I mean, that would be terrible. David Markham, Felix doing the Lord's work. Thanks very much. There was also a question that it's a little bit, I think, a little bit too soon in what's going on right now. But it was asking with the idea of, do you guys think that there'll be any, David Morris, will the Hague indict Putin? And even if they did indict him, I would not imagine the leader of Russia would ever be taken into custody. But the same way that other people were wanted.
No, because whatever you might think of Putin, he's not Pol Pot. Putin is not literal Hitler. Putin is his own thing. But he is still the president of a legitimate country, and if you question the legitimacy of the government is another thing. But I mean, he is the president of one of the world's leading powers, and the precedent that would set, I don't think the Americans would like to set that precedent themselves, considering some of the wars they've gotten themselves involved in. The Chinese would not be happy with that. The idea that Putin would be indicted for war crimes or something like that, I mean, it would really disturb the international order. The entire diplomatic order would be gravely.
It was the basic judgment that has been broken by the United States. I don't even know how many times since the end of the Second World War.
The only time national leaders, I think, in recent history are prosecuted for things like this is whenever they explicitly commit genocide. So you've got, Slobodan Milosevic and Pol Pot. And I mean, things might be heated and people will make hyperbolic statements, but I wouldn't regard what Putin's doing as genocide or ethnic cleansing.
Sorry, you just cut out there for a minute.
Sorry.
I'm not sure why. Sorry, can you repeat that? Something happened to the connection. Yeah, it's come back. Sorry, everybody.
Okay,
It's
sorry
the
for that.
restream. Yeah, they said
Yeah,
there was
I
something
was
with the connection. Sorry about that.
okay.
Guys.
I was just saying that the only in recent history, the only international leaders that I can recall off the top of my head who have been prosecuted in such a fashion is Slobodan Milosevic and Pol Pot, and both of them kind of explicitly committed genocide. And as heated as the discourse might be, I don't think anyone could seriously suggest that Putin is committing genocide or ethnic cleansing or something of that ilk. So, like I say, it would just destroy the diplomatic order because, I mean, no, like I say, there's certain American leaders who I think, for some of, especially Iraq, if this precedent was set, that would could very well come back to bite them. They'll be sanctioned. Putin, from my understanding, has already been subject to sanctions, along with Sergei Lavrov, who is the Russian foreign minister. But the idea that they would be, like, say, if they go to an international summit, and the idea that they would be arrested there for war crimes,
kidnapped or something. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. George, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I just, just gathering this, this invasion strategy, because, like I was talking about before, if you had the limited objections of opening up the canal to bring water back to Crimea and taking the eastern portions of Ukraine that speak Russian or ethnically Russians, at some point Putin's got to bring his people out of the western Dnieper area and back over to the east side of the river if he's going to have a limited objective, and so he can actually get a meaningful, measurable victory, and then exit out. So I'm very interested to see, to see what he plans to do next. I mean, I guess he's going to try to surround Kiev and force Zelensky out of power, which is going to be extremely problematic, because you're going to have to starve the city.
Yeah,
and you're going to have to cut off supply routes, which presumably that's what his actions are west of.
It's not going to look good if there's famine in the city. If there's footage of starving Ukrainians having to hide in the metro from shelling weeks on end, it's not. That's whenever Russia will really start to find itself in trouble internationally, because this is something we can get onto a bit further down the road. But I mean, internationally, Russia has surprising amount of support internationally. And if this really does go down the road of being long, drawn out, and bloody and brutal, that support would start to dry up.
Right, because that would give NATO, the international community, the reason to do an armed convoy to resupply the civilians in Kiev, which would then bring a NATO force into Kiev, which is exactly what Putin does not want. So like we were talking about before, the scale of this operation is surprising, because I'm not sure what Putin's definition of victory is and what his exit strategy is going to be.
I think. See, this is kind of what came up yesterday in our stream as well. I don't think it's feasible for the Russians to go in and quote unquote denazify and demilitarize the country, because once they leave, what's to stop them? Because I mean, the Ukrainians are not going to be very pro-Russian; they'll just rebuild themselves. So, I think like I say, this is just my own personal take. What I think the Russians are looking to do and what they're hoping to achieve is they'll secure the full Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts. They'll pass that to the separatist governments and basically break those off as independent states. They'll probably might do the same in Kharkiv, but they'll look to set up sort of a puppet government, a Russian-aligned Ukrainian government in Kiev itself, in this rump Ukrainian state, because the Russians reopened the canals, but if the Russians pull out, what's going to stop the Ukrainians from just closing the canals to Crimea again? I mean, it doesn't logically follow through. So I think the Russians want to set up, like I say, a Russian-aligned Ukrainian state to hold down the fort with some level of continuing Russian military support, but to pass off the direct administration to the Ukrainians. On that point, from yesterday, whenever the Russians pulled into certain cities, not Melitopol, but certain cities in the Kherson Oblast, whenever the Russians moved in, the Russians specifically told the local police and the local administration, the local mayors, to carry on doing their jobs, to just carry on as normal as much as they can. So that implies that the Russians aren't basically going in and setting up their own administration as they go along. So it looks like the Russians are looking to, as a decapitation strike, they want to take out the government in Kiev, but just leave the state underneath it so they can put something on top of it to administer the country in the way they see fit. So the Russians aren't looking to completely wipe out the Ukrainian state. That doesn't appear to be happening.
Yeah, but they got it. I mean, right now, Zelensky and I forget the boxer's name, the mayor.
Klitschko.
Yeah. I mean, they're in Kiev, trying to mount a counteroffensive. So it doesn't, I mean, they're not going anywhere. So I just, the limited objectives that Putin has to solidify is taking over the Kherson region for the water, and Donetsk and maybe Kharkiv, just taking over the Donbass and maintaining a foothold there. But that's taking, he's got to pull back to the eastern side of Ukraine. I don't. He's going to spend too much of his resources by moving too many people into the west of Kiev, on the west of the
Well,
that's just
I would have thought. Sorry to interrupt, but I would have thought the same, because the further west he goes into Ukraine, the more and more resistance he's going to face from the Ukrainian people. Because the further west you go in Ukraine, the more Ukrainian it is, the more pro-Western it is, the more Ukrainian speaking it is. But as I say, that's what I would have thought, but apparently not, because this push from the south and this push from the west of Kiev.
The Ukrainian army should be able to regroup at a Lviv and start marching towards Kiev, and then I don't think Putin has enough troops to stop that at some point.
Well, again, the other thing overnight is that the United States believes that so far only a third of the Russian forces committed to the invasion have actually gone into the country. So there's still 2/3 of the Russian invasion force still to enter the fight. So
a couple of points here. There's just some questions here from Lord Pepsi. Biden is to give $600 million to the Ukraine. In other words, to keep people in bank accounts. I wonder if any of that's going to be coming back his way by his son Hunter. There's a couple other questions, and I was just checking on it, and this is something I was not aware of from Pnoid News. Have you checked that Russia provides most of the world's fertilizer after prices have jumped 600%? And they're talking about now, because of the Russian supplies being cut off because of sanctions, it's going to cause problems in the growing season in places like the United States. So just in one day, from yesterday to today, the price for nitrogen fertilizer has gone up 29% in one day. And it was already gone up from before that too. So they're talking about this could cause, like, worldwide, if they try to cut Russia off from supplying nitrogen fertilizer from it to the rest of the world through sanctions, it could have long-lasting and very serious problems in the growing season in countries all around the world. So, and Cabbage 11 says this was to destroy the military infrastructure. I completely agree with that. Closer to the mic, muffled. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, you're a bit muffled at the moment, Felix.
Sorry. How about now? Any better?
a little bit.
All right. Yeah, just sorry about that. Let's see. Got to get up and stretch. So yeah, I would agree. Now, George, what do you see as the outcome vis-a-vis NATO? And for example, the one question that came in from Lord Pepsi is the $600 million in aid. I saw that as well myself. Do you think?
Yeah, Felix, you're starting to echo a bit.
Oh God. Let's see. Let me pull this up and put it back in. How about?
Hello?
Oh, yeah, that's much better.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah. Do you see that NATO supplying? Because I've seen the exact same thing, that they're handing out weapons. We were talking about that earlier, handing out weapons to citizens. Do you guys see the West getting involved with supplying weapons to the Ukrainians, if not direct military action? Because I don't imagine the United States wants to get into a shooting war with the Russians.
Yeah. If a NATO-Russian clash happens, that's the point where we need to get out of the cities. That's kind of nightmare scenario point.
So
yeah,
Russia is a nuclear power.
Yeah, just to I kind of wanted to go back to Felix, what you were talking about a minute ago, as far as the inflation going up, because Putin, if you look at the Vienna conference in when was that, February or March of 2020, he intentionally flooded the market. That's when the United States was still producing and exporting oil to drive the price down. And the purpose of that, I'm going somewhere with this because it shows a persistence and a trajectory in Putin's thinking, was to bankrupt Saudi Arabia so they can't make their rentier payments, because the whole country is basically on welfare, right? So the purpose of that was to destroy the petrodollar trading system and the dollar as the world reserve currency. And that's something that Putin is trying to induce, to my way of thinking, he's trying to induce the inflation that LBJ had when he was trying to fight a war and fund the Great Society programs at home. So in the United States, the Biden administration is trying to expand social services with the universal basic income is where they want to go, and have a very aggressive foreign policy abroad. So I kind of thought that Putin was going to do anything to induce inflation in the United States and destroy the petrodollar trading system without overextending himself. And it's that crucial aspect of the caveat of not overextending himself that he seems to have broken here, because the price of oil before last April was about $62 a barrel for Brent crude, and now it's over 100 because the United States oil's offline, so we're now a net importer again. So I thought he would stick with that strategy. So I'm kind of miffed by the scale. Again, I'm miffed by the scale of this operation. Except if, I'll hand it back over to Mike.
Sorry, what was that final point? I was just a bit distracted there.
Oh, no, I was just saying that I thought that that Putin's strategy has been to destroy the petrodollar trading system and do anything to induce inflation. So after Biden announced the Afghanistan withdrawal last April, the price of oil was $62 a barrel.
Yeah.
So then, they expected, the Taliban to take over. So the amount of pictures on TikTok and Telegram of Russian troop movements from the Urals down to the former Southern republics, the stands, to contain the Taliban were extensive. And there were so many of those mobile phone pictures that you have to say, well, this just isn't leaked photos and videos. the Russians want everybody to know about their troop movements, but make it look like it's alternative media. So the Russians filled the void when the Americans withdrew out of Afghanistan, just like they did when they moved into Syria after the Obama administration pulled out of Iraq. So then they kept on moving more and more troops eastward since then. But then the price of oils jumped up from $62 per barrel to about $100. I think it was 96 yesterday for Brent crude. So it looks like Putin's plan is to not only fill the vacuum that the United States has left in the Middle East, because the United States has destabilized Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya. And it looks like Ukraine and Central Europe is now going to be destabilized. But
I wouldn't expect Central Europe to be destabilized. I think those countries are probably fairly able to withstand any potential outside influence from Russia to try and destabilize them. And I don't think Putin is really interested in trying to cause big problems in NATO countries, because I think he knows that's a step too far himself. But yes, Russia's actually been, I guess we'll just jump into this tangent bit then. Russia has been building its own international influence network, which they're kind of linking into the Chinese one. But how sustainable the Russians can maintain that is another question. But Putin has always shown that when backed into a corner, he is able to pull off quite spectacular feats. And this is something that's kind of gone on under the radar. But yesterday, while the rest of the world was isolating Russia and saying that Russia is a pariah state, the Russians came out and announced that the president of Azerbaijan, the Azeris, came out and announced that he has now signed a strategic alliance with Russia. And that's quite an interesting move, because Azerbaijan is a major oil exporter. And not only that, if people remember recently, and this throws up all kinds of interesting hypotheticals that's probably gone on behind the scenes. Last year, the Azeris and the Armenians fought a war. The Russians were normally meant to defend Armenian territorial integrity and to prevent fighting in Karabakh. The Russians didn't. The Russians specifically stayed out of that conflict. The Turks, Israel, and to a degree the United States got very strongly behind Azerbaijan, to such an extent the Azeris basically won a complete victory over the Armenians. From my understanding, is it an agreement for Azerbaijan to basically flip on this pro-Western alliance it was going, was for the Russians to stay out of that war that they had with Armenia. So the Armenians are understandably very pissed off at this, but the Russians now basically seem to have Azerbaijan in their camp. Now, how this leads into what's happening today and the past couple of days, the Azeris in that war won it through a new tactic largely developed by the Turks and themselves called the drone swarm, which is, Felix, you did a video on this.
Yeah, if anybody's interested in my Felix Rex channel, I believe, or it might be on my Black Pigeon channel, I actually, during that crisis or during that war, I did a video explaining the tactics of the drone swarm.
So why this is particularly interesting in what's happening in Ukraine is, if the Azeris have just signed an alliance with the Russians, they've obviously been speaking behind the scenes for a while. The Turks were supplying drones to the Ukrainians up until the day right before the invasion, as there was Turkish flights coming in and out of Istanbul into Ukraine, developing these drones. One of the first airports the Russians wiped off the face of the earth was the command and control for the Ukrainian drones operating in Donbass. So I think the Azeris have basically told the Russians how to counteract any potential drone swarm tactics that the Ukrainians might try to enact. On top of that, I've also noticed if you keep an eye on footage of Russian tanks, a lot of Russian tanks now seem to have like a metal grill on the top of them. And I think that's probably,
those
that's
are
not,
the grills. The grills are used. They are also used in Afghanistan, but they're used specifically, as I understand, as protection against Javelin missiles.
Shape charge projectiles. Is it shape charge? But they're allowed to stop projectiles that explode on contact. So the idea is that a rocket will hit this wire mesh, explode, and then harmlessly the rest of it will dissipate against the armor. I've never seen Russian tanks with this grill on top of the turret. So I think that's probably one of the aspects that the Russians have figured. If the Ukrainians do manage to try and put these drone swarm tactics in action, is this grill might be there too, because the way it worked in the Azeris basically put small bombs onto drones and suicide droned them into Armenian tanks. And the Armenians just didn't have a counter for this. So I think this is the Russian counter for any potential tactics like that. But it doesn't seem that the Ukrainians have been able to enact these tactics at all. Like I say, their drone base was very heavily hit in the opening hours of the attack, and the extent of the Russian advance has probably thrown off any attempt for them to put up the infrastructure to launch and put these tactics into action. So that's an interesting aspect there. If Azerbaijan has basically flipped on the West and on the Turks and are now giving all that information to the Russians. So where Russia is meant to be internationally isolated, their direct military alliance has grown in the past couple of days by picking up one of the world's major oil producers. On top of that, just before Christmas or after Christmas, I forget, there was a major event in Kazakhstan. I don't know the details of it. It still seems very murky, but there appears to have been a color revolution or a coup or something of that extent. As soon as that happened, the Russian VDV, their paratroopers, flew straight into Kazakhstan to establish order and to prop up the Kazakh government. So that's brought the Kazakhs very strongly back. If they ever were drifting out of it, that's brought them very strongly back into the Russian orbit.
Just on that, just quickly, Pinoy News again. He said that the Azerbaijan agreement would plug a hole in their southern border, and he also says the Russian population is shrinking. Demographics is destiny. But yeah, he believes that an agreement like that would plug up.
Well, I mean, it pushes the Turks out because that's what the Russians are very scared of, and this is what I was commenting on the time. I think we've lost George again. I'll finish off this point. Hopefully, we can get him back.
Yeah.
So that's what I was commenting at the time, was the inaction of the Russians during the Armenian-Azeri war. But obviously, this now the idea behind it seems to have panned out, is that the Turks thought they were now getting more influence. Obviously, I'm pretty sure that the Azeris and the Turks will still remain quite friendly with each other, but it's not going to be the Turkish-Azeri alliance that they fought. So the Russians have now pulled the Azeris back in. And again, as I'm saying, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, these two countries that have come very strongly back into Russian orbit, major oil and energy producers. So if these countries really start to pull the Russian line, these sanctions, if you think it's just going to be Russian oil hit badly, pull in Azeri oil, bring in Kazakh natural gas. It is going to be very brutal for the global economy if those producers are locked out of Western markets. On top of this, from my understanding, is the Saudis and OPEC have said that they have no interest themselves in increasing oil production to match any cutoff in Russian and Kazakh natural gas. So we are looking at the potential of a major energy crisis in the years ahead. So in a way, Putin's kind of played, to a degree, as it appears, as it stands, Putin's kind of pulled off a geopolitical masterstroke. So when you think Russia is going to be completely isolated off, it expands its sphere of influence into the Caucasus massively. And not only that, a lot of these sanctions that they've been talking about putting on the past couple of days, they've been massively watered down. Competing nations in Europe are constantly bickering back and forth about specific sanctions that they want opt-outs from, and that's weakening any potential global lockout of the economy against the Russians. So again, I don't want to come off as like an RT mouthpiece or something, but things as it stands seem to be going surprisingly well for the Russians in terms of global politics. and also in the field.
I would agree with that. Sorry, George, you go ahead. I just want to make sure. I was just going to ask if you got back in.
Yeah. By bringing up Azerbaijan, you raise a whole bunch of issues because they used the drone strikes on the Armenians to wipe out their tanks and armored vehicles extremely effectively, and the drones were mostly made by Turkey. Now, Azerbaijan is a Turkic-speaking country. They all speak the same language because I go back and forth. But the big, huge Turkish pipelines, well, the Turks have been building pipelines through Eilat, just south of Baku, and then underneath the Caspian to Turkmenbashi. So they've been reaching over to the other Turkic countries because all the stands are Turkic countries all the way to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. So they've been building pipelines eastward because Turkey itself doesn't have any oil, but they have the transit routes into Europe. So if the Russians cut off the natural gas supply to Ukraine, well, then obviously it all just goes through Eilat in Azerbaijan. So what Putin's done with Eilat is obviously they rigged this behind the scenes is to not let that happen. So whatever deals are worked out, they're just going to let the prices rise and sell, less oil at a higher price. But it's already planned behind the scenes. So it speaks to your point that Putin has planned this for a long time and got everybody on board. Because Putin's been in Baku to meet with the Aliyevs several times.
Yeah, like I say, once backed into a corner, Putin can really pull off some quite spectacular feats. Although he always gets backed into a corner, which is a sign of weakness in of itself. But whenever he is, he does surprise the world. And I don't really think the West, especially Western media, but then again, what media is diabolical by its very nature, but Western media doesn't really seem to have picked up on the connotations of this. So while all eyes are on Ukraine, is Putin's pulling off a masterstroke in the Caucasus?
Yeah, he has. And again, it all has to do with oil and natural gas pipelines to Europe. Because if he can induce inflation.
Sorry, Joe, can you explain to the audience why it's about oil and gas pipelines?
Between Russia and Central Asia, you have just tremendous amounts of oil, natural gas, and every kind of mineral that you can think of, especially if you include Afghanistan. So Turkey has been building oil and natural gas pipelines into Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, and the biggest one is Kazakhstan, because they're all Turkic-speaking countries. They're all Turkic countries. So if Turkey can give an alternate access for the stands to get their products to Europe.
Oh, have we lost him again?
Sounds like we've lost him again. I think he's in a third world country at the moment. I think he's having problems with his things. He hasn't dropped out, but he's obviously dropped out.
Wait, okay. No, I'm back. Okay. So since Turkey, if they can offer
sounds like he's going.
He's in and out. Just give him a second, see if he's able to pop back in.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I might have to switch to a hard line or something. So if he can give the stands an alternative way to get the oil and natural gas to the European markets, then the stands don't have to go through Russia where they're going to get ripped off. They don't have to go through China where they're going to get ripped off. the Turkic countries can make more money, and they don't have to go through Iran, which has sanctions, or Iraq, which is in turmoil. So Putin getting Azerbaijan's ports to ship or not ship oil and natural gas back and forth means that he can control prices a lot easier. So Azerbaijan is a very pivotal area because of the oil and natural gas pipelines going through it.
Where do you guys see this going insofar as a possible, we talked about it a little bit, but do you see that this is going to churn out to be a long occupation, or is it going to be the installation of a puppet government? How do you see this playing out? Because I think, as we said previously, I don't see Russia having the capability, the manpower, or even the money to be able to spend or just to be able to keep this going for a long time.
Do you want to jump into it, George, or do you want me to?
Oh, yeah, I would love to. Because you're talking about Azerbaijan, you're talking about inflation. What I've been thinking about for years is that Putin's main goal here is to recreate the late 1960s, early 1970s inflation in the United States, because Biden is expanding the Great Society programs just like LBJ did, and is trying to do an aggressive foreign policy just like LBJ did in Vietnam. So I think his end game is to collapse the petrodollar by causing inflation in the United States. I don't think that's changed, because what we've been talking about is, the extent of his Ukrainian invasion is kind of baffling, because, yeah, he can get the United States to overcommit, but does he lose his regime in the process if he becomes too unpopular in Russia? But yeah, that's why I don't think it's sustainable. He's got to pull across the eastern Dnieper, as far as I see, and consolidate the Kherson region, because they need the water, and hold the Donbass area. But yeah, his end game is to ultimately exacerbate inflation, be cost push inflation in the United States. We've already had the COVID lockdowns. So I'm thinking that if he just gives the United States a little bit more of a nudge, we'll go up to what's the actual inflation rate in the United States now? They officially say it's 7.5%, but we all know it's about double that.
Yeah.
If you can increase, because we have monetary inflation with all the printing of money, but you have three types of inflation: cost push, demand pull, and monetary. So we have monetary inflation. So if he can induce cost push by increasing the price of energy, that could really bring the United States into an official 20% inflation, and actually collapse the petrodollar trading system, which really would bring about a global calamity. So I think that is his end game. How he plans to get there by invading Ukraine on such a large scale, it's a really super risky move.
Well, I think the situation in Ukraine is because Putin and the Russian state obviously feel that it just cannot tolerate the drift of Ukraine any further into NATO's orbit. So I think the economic objectives, if those are Putin's, that's probably a bit more tangential to what's happening in Ukraine. I feel Ukraine is probably something that I don't want to say forced upon them, because they are the ones who launched the invasion, but it's the crisis that's cropped up suddenly, especially since Biden took office. I think they felt that it was now or never sort of territory, as they need to do it sooner rather than later, because as the Ukrainian army professionalized and it got more Western trained and more Western equipped, is the ability for Russia to pull off such an extensive operation as it has, and with the seeming success that it has would diminish over time?
Yeah, obviously there's several things going on at once. Because some people are talking about, the United States has so many problems because I've been watching videos for the past several years about the amount of unfunded and underfunded state and federal pensions that the United States is going to have. So we're going to have, not just the $30 trillion in debt that we have now, but it's really double or triple that if you start including state and federal unfunded
liabilities. Yeah.
Unfunded liabilities. Then it goes up to double or triple that because, because there's several financial analysts that talk about, a lot of this great reset is that between the United States, Canada, and Western Europe.
I'm sorry if I could just interrupt. There's just something in chat I have to address. There's some person saying that, are we all naive? Can we not see that they've suddenly stopped talking about COVID? Sheer coincidence. I mean, what's the game plan with this? Do you think the Russians invade, or the global conspiracy is to start a war so we would forget about COVID? I mean, I've seen this a couple of times in chat. I mean, guys, I think it's probably you're reaching for the birds maybe a bit there. I don't think Russia invaded Ukraine just to change the COVID narrative. It sounds a bit far-fetched to me. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to address that because it's come up a few times in chat.
Yeah, no. As long as you're not saying that I'm saying that.
Nobody's saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's just like I say. It's coming up in chat, and it's just it's a very bizarre take.
I think the mainstream media has emphasized the eastward expansion of NATO as to take some of the focus off of Biden's sputtering economy and his tanking in the polls, but that wouldn't be a motivation for Putin to move. On the other hand, he, like I was saying before, ever since the Vienna conference, which coincided when COVID first came out, if you look back at Trump's first couple of press conferences, he looks really, really super nervous for a couple of days. And some people thought he was nervous about COVID. No, it's all the economic ramifications behind it, because Putin was purposely dumping oil on the market just to bankrupt Saudi Arabia. Just in background, Control Risk out of UK, Control Risk Cambridge, had predicted that Saudi Arabia would go bankrupt and unable to pay its welfare payments by the year 2020. At the present oil prices of the time period, because oil was kept on falling the more the United States produced. So it looked like Putin's goal was to bankrupt Saudi Arabia as a way of destroying the petrodollar and the U.S. reserve currency. So I still think that's his long-term goal, but he needs inflation to go up a little bit higher. So then it looks like he's pushing back against NATO, but still trying to induce late 1960s, early 1970s inflation in the United States. He still has two-pronged strategy that he's going through. So, because when you were talking about Azerbaijan, if they stop selling oil and natural gas through Ukraine to drive up prices in Western Europe to bring their economy to a halt by cost push inflation, then Turkey just sells more and totally negates everything that Putin is doing to destroy the West financially. So that's why he spent a lot of time with Ilham Aliyev in Baku, to get him to control.
It is quite a stroke, because I mean, Azerbaijan, for people who don't know, it's a Shiite Muslim country, so it's culturally similar to Iran, but they have big problems with the Iranians because Azerbaijan is very pro-Israel. It was armed quite a lot in the recent Armenian Azeri wars, so it's very pro-Israel. It was getting quite a lot of assistance from NATO and the United States in particular. Diplomatically, the West was very strongly behind Azerbaijan. So, like I say, you have to sort of picture this was a quasi Western aligned state in the heart of the Caucasus, right below Russia's southern border, that is now just suddenly flipped into an open alliance with Russia. It's quite a massive geopolitical swing.
There's a comment here that's actually kind of interesting, and I would agree with it. It says that it's from Pinoy News again. We're going back to a multipolar world. China's new census numbers say they'll have half the population by 2050. Bretton Woods is over. Boomers are all retiring at once, causing inflation in the labor market. Yeah, I'd like to ask you, George, if you could maybe comment a little bit on, you were talking about Russia trying or attempting to basically crash the petrodollar. But as I understand it, the Chinese have that very same wish and are working toward it as well. So could you maybe comment on China a little bit?
Well, the whole idea of getting they're trying to move to a petro yuan. So I'm adjusting my map in the background here. And they, with the BRICS countries, with their Shanghai alliance. So their whole Belt and Road initiative has been, at first it was initially to increase the railroads and highways going to Iran and pipelines, so Iran could have a Silk Road strategy and circumvent Western sanctions by sending their oil to China, which doesn't have any and has to import it, almost all of it. And then, of course, those railroads and highways go through Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan up to the Caspian. So it's in a way it's competing with Turkey's pipelines, and in a way it's complementing them, because now the Turkic countries can move the oil and natural gas and minerals through the Caspian to Azerbaijan and to Turkey, or they can move it to China. So China's Belt and Road Initiative is to internalize its logistical supply lines, because otherwise the U.S. Navy can cut them off at the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Malacca, or the South China Sea. And then, up until 2014, there was no pipelines going from the Urals, where Russia also has oil and natural gas. And then that was completed in a couple of years. And a few years ago, they started building another set of Russo-Chinese pipelines going through Mongolia and even eastern Russia. So over the past 2 decades, the amount of oil and pipeline infrastructure in that region has shifted towards China, so they don't have to use the seas where the U.S. Navy can interdict them as easily. You would have to use long-range bombing to do that. And of course, the problem with that is the United States gave up Bagram in August, or in July they left. So the whole idea of holding Bagram was supposed to be a means of bombing those pipelines in the case of a war. So again, Biden's pullout of Afghanistan left a lot of people really miffed, but the combination of pulling out of Bagram and stopping the pipelines and oil drilling in the United States really strengthened Putin's and Xi's hands in Eurasia.
It is quite astonishing because if I'm not mistaken, I believe the United States had become self-sufficient in its own energy needs a couple of years ago as well.
They did,
Correct.
but
And
they're not. They're not now.
yeah,
Sorry,
Yeah.
George, you go
well,
ahead.
it's even worse than that because we have the ability through fracking to get basically an unlimited amount of natural gas. So then the bottleneck becomes the amount of liquefied natural gas plants. So we only had a few in Louisiana and up on Port of Calais and on the Maine and New Brunswick border. Those were supposed to be expanded, but you still got to get the natural gas there, which you still need. You still need the pipeline infrastructure to do that, to rapidly expand them. So that way you would make Germany and Western Europe completely also independent from Middle Eastern oil or Soviet oil or Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, so
Well, it's interesting that it's kind of working in the opposite because I think we're starting to go off on a bit of a tangent, so we'll try and drag it back a bit. But just to give my 2 cents on this for a historical perspective, is one of the big things that really impacted the Soviet Union in the 80s and led to the economic crisis that then led to its collapse was after the Arab-Israeli war, the USSR really expanded its oil production, and that brought in a lot of extra oil revenue into the state budget. In the 1980s, the Saudis and Ronald Reagan made an agreement that the Saudis would basically flood the market with cheap oil to undercut the Soviet boon that they were getting through their export of oil. And that's one of the things that led to basically the collapse of the USSR, was this undercutting of its state budget on its oil revenue. So the fact that this is now happening in reverse to a degree is quite an interesting, like I say, history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes.
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, we might be off topic of Ukraine, but we're still on topic as far as discussing what Putin's endgame is.
Okay, radio. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean that as a slight in any way. It's just I'm just a bit mindful that the chat might be a bit, or the people watching might be a bit more minded on Ukraine, but feel free to carry on.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw those in there because it's obviously we've been tracking different parts of this. We have different expertises on the chat here, but that move that he did in March of 2020, Putin, I mean, at the Vienna OPEC +1 conference, was so blatantly to destroy the petrodollar and to destroy Saudi Arabia. And of course he can do that because Russia grows its own food. Saudi Arabia is a desert. So, he could take, he's been taking very calculated risks and pissing people off, but very calculated. So is a very and you brought up how he, you brought up Baku, and I explained the importance of those pipelines going through Eilat, Azerbaijan. It's it's like 45 minutes south of Baku. That's where the big shipping ports are that go back and forth across the Caspian, and also where the pipelines go through. So he's done everything really calculated, and then he seemingly overextended in Ukraine. But what you were talking about, as far as his population growth pressures in our private chat last week, is very germane because it speaks to his window that he has to act within, plus his own age of 73.
So just to outline for chat, because obviously this was a private chat we had in Felix's Discord, but just for people listening, is we had a very long discussion on this last week. But essentially, yes, we've been talking about Russia as if it's this unstoppable international Machiavellian force that has everything going its way. while it seems that right now, and it is able to do quite amazing things and really punch above its weight, in the long term, Russia is actually in a quite weakening position going forward. Demographically, the Russians are not having enough kids. Most Russian population growth since the collapse of the USSR has been ethnic Russians moving back to Russia from former Soviet republics. The birth rate has somewhat improved, but they're not above replacement rate. And the places that are above replacement rate, they're not ethnic Russians. These are the Caucasian peoples. These are Tatars. These are Buryats, basically all the other ethnic groups that are in Russia. Ukrainians and Russians are not really having kids enough to sustain the country they've got. Economically, Russia's really not done very well since the collapse of the USSR. A lot of that economic growth that Russia's had since 2000, since Putin came to power, a lot of that's remained concentrated within the oligarchical classes and in the cities. A lot of Russians living out in the countryside, they either live as well or in many cases worse off than they did whenever the USSR still existed. So and then just to wrap it up, industrially, outside of selling resources to the first world and weapons to the third world, Russia's economy is not very competitive. No one's buying their cars. Their industrial goods don't go very far in international markets. So Russia does have its problems, and going forward, it is serious problems it needs to address, and it's not really addressing them. At least they haven't been so far. So that's just to sum up like the 5-hour discussion we had in Discord a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's a discussion that we had in a private Discord. So I'm thinking about opening up a public Discord, but I don't really have enough moderators at this moment. So if people are asking if they could join the Discord, it's a private Discord for supporters at this point. But there's just a couple of things I just want to a couple of questions. Please ask your guests if they think the USA's military commitment to wokeness is something the Russians take into consideration. That's from A Long Story Short. What do you guys think about that question?
I think it's that. I think the Russians laugh at it and stuff like that. Yeah, I think the United States is still a very capable, competent fighting force, but it must be like a slow cancer eating its way through the ranks to have this wokage. And it's not just the United States military. Yesterday, as the Russian invasion was in full swing, what does the British MOD post? It posts about the achievements of LGBTs in the armed forces. And it's like, how like really is this what Western military standards are these days? It's about how diverse it can be.
Well, George, can you tell our because I don't know if we've talked about this openly on an open chat, but we have talked about it privately, how when you were in Afghanistan right before the fall of Kabul, talking to people from the State Department and the flags that they were flying in the Middle East during that month.
Just to kick that off. Kick that off. I mean, just before the fall of Kabul, what was the U.S. Embassy posting? It was posting about LGBT Pride Month in Kabul, in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, Felix, I sent you. I'll try to find it in a minute. I sent you that link to that Washington Post story where where people from the military were really miffed at the complete lackadaisical attitude that the State Department had. So it just wasn't me saying it, because the Washington Post published the story. But yeah, it was. I was tracking the number of border control points that the Taliban was systematically taking over, and they were taking them over. In background, the Pashtun areas are on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. The Pashtun people, prior to the 1947 creation of Pakistan, had control all the way from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan all the way over to the Indus River, which is now Pakistan. So the Pashtun Taliban did not take over the border control points on the Afghan-Pakistan border at first, where they're the strongest. They took them over in the western part of the country first. So when they did that, it looked like the supply routes were open, when in fact they unofficially controlled the ones on the east the whole time. Then they came back and they closed the ones in the east, and then Kabul had to be evacuated because at that point you couldn't get logistical supply routes in and out of Kabul. So the reason why I explain that is the strategy of the Taliban took place over several months. And in the meantime, Russia is seeing this and moving its tanks southward. But then you have, according to the Washington Post article, it's not just me saying it. It seems like the State Department was, pushing the diversity agenda instead of getting prepared for a major conflict. I know the Duran had a few shows on that also. So yeah, it's
sorry to interrupt. We've just got some breaking news, but the Ukrainian government has officially asked YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, I don't know why they'd ask Netflix, but basically they're asking them to block their services in Russia. So they're
Facebook already has blocked theirs. A couple other just things that I want to get to as well. There's a question here from Port Film Co-op, and this is a good question because I haven't seen very much about this. It's what is the overall Western public sentiment with what's going on right now? I think it's overwhelmingly anti-Russian. Do you guys want to maybe comment?
I would agree with that. I mean, as sympathetic as I am to Russia, I mean, invading another country, especially in Europe, it's never really going to win your hearts and minds, is it?
Mm-hmm. Pinoy News is also he's asking, the U.S. he's saying it is oil dependent still. We import sour crude to cut our light sweet fracking crude. The price rises because we sell oil. Maybe that would be better for George.
What he's saying that
that the U.S. is oil dependent still. We import sour crude to cut our light sweet fracking crude. The price rises are because
we've got oil. Quite a significant. If this is accurate,
send it over in the chat, and I'll.
It's in Cyrillic. Granted, this is to be fair, this is a Russian outlet, but apparently the United States said it will support Ukraine's decision for neutrality if Kiev independently decides it is best for itself. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman.
Let me see.
Let me do a bit of digging and see if there is something actually to that.
Reuters would probably be, or AP would be the best to find something like that.
If you guys want to carry on, I'll have a little sleuth and see if I can find anything to corroborate that.
All right. So, George, what do you think is going to basically happen vis-a-vis the inflation that's happening right now in terms of the political fallout in places like the United States, for example?
Well, Biden's approval ratings are really low. So, yes, the mainstream media has been pushing the Ukraine. I mean, some people say, they've really been pushing this, to make sure a war happens. I mean, that's just hyperbole, of course. But, I mean, everyone, including Putin, is, knows that the midterm elections are coming up, and everyone is trying to affect them in some way. And certainly with the rise with the shutting down of the economy, and then all the inflation that's created because of printing money, monetary inflation. I mean, Putin is definitely trying to increase more inflation to cause some kind of political change in the United States. That being said, the mainstream media is very much trying to take the focus off of Biden's sputtering economy and low job numbers growth. to try to boost Biden's poll numbers. So yeah, everybody can see that the midterms are coming up, and right now it looks like there's going to be a red wave in the House and the Senate. And if the Republicans take back both the House and the Senate, then you have Biden, who is declining mentally. It looks like, if I could not go out on a limb there, right? So
no limb with that. He does appear to have some sort of cognitive troubles. He really does, and that's not trying to slight the man. That's just being completely honest about some of the more erratic behavior I've seen in him.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Joe Rogan, he always talks about, if you look at Biden of 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, and you look at him now, everyone knows he's in decline. So if the Republicans win the House and Senate, the Democrats are in trouble, because how is, Biden is just in no shape to fight back. So there is a lot of these, people are taking, Putin is taking the politics of the United States very much into consideration, because it had to have something to do with launching this invasion now, because now it's, several months ahead of the November elections.
Not only that, it's what, 6-7 months after Afghanistan, one of the biggest displays of American strategic weakness in living memory, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
That almost certainly emboldened Moscow.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the United States does appear to be a country on decline. Another question coming in that's very interesting is his thoughts on whether, this is coming from Frank, thoughts on whether removing Russia from SWIFT would cause them to turn to crypto, specifically Bitcoin, causing Bitcoin to skyrocket. Any thoughts about this?
Just so you're aware, Felix, you just have a slight echo on your end. But from my understanding, it's mostly because the Germans especially won't allow it, is the idea that Russia would be cut off from SWIFT. That's been rejected. As far as I'm aware, that's what's come out.
The British and the Canadians seem to be the biggest cheerleaders for Russia's removal from SWIFT. And I've read, though, that the Americans aren't going that far yet, but there is a lot of talk.
So just so you're aware, Felix, you are getting a bit of an echo and you've gone a bit muffled on us.
Okay, let me try this again.
So,
what now?
I don't know, George, speak a bit more.
Is that any better?
Audio, yes, and again, there is just a slight echo, but it's not stream destroying, at least for me. I don't know if George has the same issue or.
All right.
Yeah, Felix is echoing.
Okay, it's not too bad, but there is a slight echo. But I think, George, you'd probably have a better idea of SWIFT, because I don't have much idea on financial instruments and institutions and stuff.
Well, that's not going to be necessarily my expertise either.
That's okay. I'll be back in 1 second. I'm trying to fix this and also get myself a glass of water.
Me and George will carry on.
Hold the ship, please. Thank you.
Yeah, but the there is a lot to unpack there, because yes, with Bitcoin, for large scale petroleum transactions, you can move $100 million on Bitcoin pretty easily. So they don't need SWIFT to make their major transactions as far as oil and natural gas sales. The other thing is, if you're trading with China principally, you can move everything with the yuan pretty easily, because then you would be trading oil for whatever China sells. But China has such a deep economy, they sell everything from cars and all kinds of electronic gadgets. So when it comes down to actually trading for consumer products, you could actually you can go pretty far with that.
Yeah. Well, the thing that sort of gets me is if the Russians were hypothetically cut off for SWIFT, it might, in a way, be it depends on your point of view, of course, but it might be a sort of good thing, because it could lead to the Chinese and the Russians creating their own international banking systems and money transfer systems. Because whenever I had a quick look into SWIFT the other day, I was quite amazed at this international money transfer system was basically held at the whim of the United States government. So the United States government could just decide, granted it was on Wikipedia, so forgive me, but I have no much idea about SWIFT, but I was reading about how the United States government could appropriate a person in Denmark sending money to Germany because they were buying Cuban cigars. I mean, that's I don't understand why the United States should be allowed to have that influence over citizens in other countries making transactions between themselves. I mean, I find that I mean, just given, I mean, on a lower level, the fact that the US government can just arbitrarily close people like political distance bank accounts in the United States is disturbing enough. But the fact that they can do it to Germans and Danes buying Cuban cigars, and now that they could potentially do it to an entire nation state, I think that's far too much power that any nation should hold.
Yeah, absolutely. And Russia, China, and Iran are obviously, they're acutely aware of that. Yesterday, I mean, there's lots of directions you can go with this conversation, but what I've always talked about is, it's, ever since George Kennan's long telegram, he was the ambassador to Moscow, during World War II, and afterwards, he wrote this very long telegram about how to isolate Russia. And at that time, Chiang Kai-shek was overthrown and, by the Maoist revolution. And as far as causing fissures between Russian communism and Chinese communism, and they called it the Five Power Center Doctrine, because the if the industrial centers were North America, Japan, and Western Europe, then 3 of the 5 industrial power centers were in the Western camp, and then 2 would be in the communist camp. But if you can divide and conquer between Russia and China, that would be the strategy of the United States. So that was, that 5 power center doctrine of divide Russia and China was the policy for the United States. I'm gonna say that lasted up until the Obama administration. People will argue about when that stopped, but now the policy of the United States has driven Russia and China ever more closely together, that if you throw Russia off of SWIFT, well, then you've actually run out of punishments that you can do to Russia, and then they can go, full hog as far as totally aligned.
Yeah, I mean,
and
if Iran is the international pariah, because you can't really sanction Iran anymore, can you? So that's why Iran is off doing the things it does across the Middle East with impunity, because how can you punish them anymore unless you're going to invade them? So it's bad enough with Iran. Do you really want to turn Russia into that state? I mean, but like I say, even then, is a lot of these sanctions, they don't appear to be materializing to the extent they would, because different European powers are bickering over how far they should go. They want specific opt-outs for specific industries or goods. So it doesn't look like Russia's really going to suffer as much as certain nations think it should. But
well, again, you brought up Azerbaijan, but I mean, let's just talk about the whole Caspian region. If you have sanctions already against Iran and you're putting more sanctions on Russia, then you're not only driving Russia and China close together, you're driving Russia and Iran much closer together, which then cuts off the oil supply pipelines going from Azerbaijan into Turkey. It makes that situation much, much worse and strengthens Putin's hand in the Caspian.
Yeah.
So, if you throw Russia off of SWIFT, you're really talking about totally consolidating Eurasia. Everything between Russia and China. And in that case, it's India that becomes the wild card. And Trump had much better relations with Modi and India than the administration.
India diplomatically is quite close to Russia. In fact, I actually think Modi is trying to walk in. Don't quote me on this, but I believe I've seen statements that Modi has not condemned the Russians for the invasion, because, like I say, it goes back to historical. The Soviet Union and India were very close. That's carried on into the modern era, where Russia supplies extensive military arms to India. So those two have a very close diplomatic relationship. But India and China are two very, very, I wouldn't say outright hostile powers, but they're not friendly with each other. So that's an interesting trilateral relationship that could potentially develop there.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of hostility between China and Russia all across the Himalayan region there. I don't want to get bogged down in that, but China has what, like 1.6 billion people, and India has about 1.4 billion or something like that.
Yeah,
that's about there. Yeah.
You're talking about.
Just so you're aware, Felix, you're loud, but you're a bit muffled.
Okay, try it again.
Yeah. So.
With Russia on good terms with China and good terms with India. So you have, and Pakistan's, I think, has about 240 million, but their population is rapidly growing. It's doubling every 25 years. So if you look at the number of people that are in those areas, you have enough of an internal market where they don't need Western markets for economies of scale as much as people think.
Yeah,
they could survive just fine by trading with each other.
Yeah.
They've got.
Go on. Finish your point.
Well, it might. Since Russia has been selling its oil, the oligarchs and the people in the oil industry are making money. But the rest of the population has not been making money. They've been acquiring real estate and other businesses overseas rather than internal economic development.
Well, that's what I meant, is that wealth has mostly remained constrained into the oligarchical class and in the cities. It's not really filtered down to the wider population.
Right. So if you throw them off of SWIFT, and then they have to rely on an internal market between China, India, and Russia, I think that would actually lead to the economic development of Russia, which is exactly what the United States would not want.
Yeah.
In other words, it would backfire.
Yeah, it could. Yeah. Because I mean, that would, well, you never know these things. It could backfire, or it could lead to the collapse of the Russian state. Who knows what the future holds? But
or massive inflation in the United States and ruin the petrodollar, which again, that's what I think the goal is for Putin.
So on this point, Felix, do you want to give us a bit of a check, see if you fixed it?
Yeah, hopefully I have. Have I fixed it?
I'm afraid not. We can hear you okay. It's just it's the quality isn't the best.
God, let me just try again.
Yeah, no problem. Well, while you fix that, I'll just give us a quick.
How about now?
Yes, that's perfect now.
All right, fine. Good, thanks. I was kind of afraid to talk because it just sounded so bad.
Okay, it's just a little bit quiet now, but otherwise it's perfect.
I'll raise the volume in.
Hey, Felix.
Yeah.
Yeah. While you're gone, I found that Washington Post article about.
I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you can post that in the chat so people can look at it.
But I'll just give us a quick update. I'll post this in the chat again. Felix, if you wouldn't mind posting it in the chat whenever you've got a bit of free time on your hand.
Right.
I have set up a temporary Telegram group where I'm posting all the footage and all the stuff that I've been following the past couple of days into it. So I'll just post this in the private chat if you want to put that out at your leisure. Probably leave it a couple minutes till people can read that article. But I've just posted onto that in regards to the Snake Island story that we were following earlier on. The Russians are saying that the border guards buried by Zelensky from Snake Island, that must be a bad translation, but essentially the Russians are saying that they captured the Ukrainian defenders of Snake Island. There was 83 of them, and I'm assuming they've been taken to Crimea, where they've laid down their arms, and the Russians have basically said that they will be free to leave if they sign documents to not partake further in the war. So that story that's been doing the rounds of Western media, at the least, the Russian counter narrative to it, and like I say, the footage, at least to me, is looking fairly convincing, is the Russians are saying there was 83 Ukrainian soldiers on Snake Island, that they surrendered in the end, and that they've been captured, and that they are now interned in Crimea, and the Russians are offering to release them if they sign documents saying that they will not take part further in the war. So that is what the Russian narrative is.
Where the Ukrainian narrative is completely the opposite, that they were supposedly going to be given the highest award for bravery and valor posthumously, right? Posthumously.
Yeah. But on top of that, I'm not seeing a lot of stuff coming out from Kiev. I don't know if that's because potentially the internet is dodgy around there and people just aren't uploading stuff, or if there is a lull in the fighting as both sides dig in and set up for future operations later in the day. But apart from that, it appears that the Russians and the Donetsk military in the Donbass are starting to break through Ukrainian lines towards Mariupol. So that's kind of on the field from what I've seen over the past since we've been streaming that's developed so far.
Right. Okay. Any word of what's going on in... So for people just joining, I'm talking right now with Michael and George, and we're talking about the situation in the Ukraine and a lot of the geopolitical aspects surrounding it. On the screen right now is the article that George was talking about previously, and I have put it in the chat. I'll put it again in the chat right now for anybody that wants to watch that. And bring that back.
So I've gotten a video, granted from Ukrainian sources here, but it kind of backs up what I was saying about I'll post it in the Telegram, and then I'll post it in the private chat for YouTube. There's a video coming out from Ukrainian sources. For people who weren't here at the start, the rundown I gave is that on the first day of the invasion is that elements of the Russian army were overconfident, advanced too far, too fast, and found themselves cut off. The Ukrainians are now releasing what looks to be a video. What they're saying looks like a Russian MTL APC and a Russian tank that advanced basically until they ran out of fuel and have since been captured. So that's just kind of to, I would assume, back up what I said earlier.
Right.
Yeah. Where was that?
Here, I'll post a link of it in the private chat. I've posted it in the Telegram as well.
Okay. Yeah, it would have been funny if they just pulled into a gas station.
Well, there has been footage of that out of Kherson. There was some Ukrainian gas station, and all of a sudden a column of Russian T-72s just pulled into it and started. Well, I don't think they filled up, because I don't think you can just put normal fuel into a tank. Does it not need its own specific fuel, or?
No, you can put fuel oil in them or diesel.
But their Ural trucks definitely started filling up out of this gas station. So
yeah.
On just a complete side note, but it does have to do with Ukraine. It's kind of an interesting story, and I actually went to this place earlier today. It's a place called Shibuya Station, and it's the place they always show as this sort of in movies when they want to say, Big Ben in London, the Eiffel Tower in Paris, I don't know, the Empire State Building in New York. Shibuya is where they set the stage for any sort of movie or TV show in Tokyo, and it looks kind of like Blade Runner, to be honest. But it's kind of interesting. A friend of mine sent me this, so I went and saw this today. They had Ukrainians and Japanese are protesting the Russian invasion outside the Shibuya station. But this is the funny part here is there is a Reddit mod, and they were trying to organize people to go to this event. And this is what the Reddit mod had to say. He said he locked the I don't even use Reddit, so he locked whatever the page that it was on. Basically, locking. It's a violation of the terms of your status of residence to engage in political demonstrations. Even participation in peaceful and legal demonstrations can be sufficient reason for future visa renewals to be denied. Free speech and political expression are protected, but this simply means that you cannot be charged with a criminal offense for simple political activities. However, it does not stop the Ministry of Justice in Japan from using political acts as a reason in declining an extension of your residency period. Further, if the demonstration takes a turn into illegal activities, participation could be grounds for deportation. Whether you choose to risk it or not, it's up to you, but please do not use this sub as a place to organize. So the funny part about this is, and I'm going to be putting pictures. I don't have an Instagram, so I'll maybe put them on Twitter later today. You had all of these, it's always the same sort of people, right? They're always kind of these, it'll be whatever the political situation is or whatnot, but there's always kind of these, I don't know, these kind of virtue signaling Japanese people like that just jump on board with anything. And, probably most of them have never even been to the Ukraine, but it's just kind of funny, it's I don't know, it's just, most people don't like these kind of things because here in Japan, people aren't very political, especially with world events. They just don't care, right?
Yeah.
You almost have all of it organized by foreigners. So when they had the Black Lives Matter riots in the United States last summer, you had like people coming and then getting angry because there wasn't any Japanese people there, right? And it's kind of interesting. It's a complete tangent. Sorry, guys. I just thought I'd show this and also tell people to take a look on my. I won't put it on. Put on my Telegram. I'll put them on my Telegram later today, and you can see all the pictures from today. And the funniest part is they were all set. They were all spelling the name Putin wrong. It was like Putin go home, but it was Pootun, Putin. And
is that the sick burn they've got?
Well, I'm wondering if it's just spelling mistake or a sick burn, but probably a sick burn, yeah.
Just again, Felix, you're just getting slightly a bit muffled again. I don't know if that's me or if that's something that the chat has to deal with as well.
Not sure. Sorry, I'm going to have to get a new mic, obviously, if this keeps happening. I don't know what the problem is because
the perennial problem, the Russian hackers, the Ukrainian hackers are attacking the stream. So have we lost George? George, are you still there?
No, George is gone completely. Okay, George is gone. He's fallen out.
Oh, but what's happening to the stream? They're shutting us down.
Yeah, shutting
Russians, Ukrainians. We don't know. Someone's attacking the stream. But
yeah. So George is gone. He is gone.
I guess until we start to get things back on track, I'll just address this. I did see in the chat, and there has been a lot of discussion of this on social media. It's kind of similar to the Snake Island story, is the quote-unquote ghost of Kiev.
I have seen that too. I've seen that as well, yeah.
That I'm very doubtful of that as well. I can understand why that's a very appealing story because it helps lift up morale for the Ukrainians, but from what I've seen across Russian and Ukrainians, apart from allegations that this aerial ace is single-handedly taken down the Russian Air Force on his own, there's been no footage, there's been no photos coming out to corroborate either this aircraft in action or any of the kills that are being alleged to him. So not saying he doesn't exist, but from what I've seen so far, I'm very skeptical of the claim. Do I think that Ukrainian aircraft have shot down Russian aircraft? Almost certainly. They probably have. But the way things have gone is the Russians by and large have air superiority across the country, and especially over Kiev. It's only really contested by the Ukrainian air defense. The large swathes of the Ukrainian Air Force were wiped out in the opening strikes.
Right. There is some footage, even on the footage that I have here that I rendered out today that you sent me. There is the name escapes me, but we talked about it yesterday. The Russian version of their Apache attack helicopter.
Oh, the Ka-52, yeah, the alligators.
Yeah, it looks like there's a couple of those that have been shot down and footage.
Yeah, one of it, I think one of them was actually, it suffered a complete catastrophic kill because there's footage of what appears to be one going down into a lake, but another one appears to have been hit by maybe a Stinger or some form of man pads, but the pilots were able to land it. But the pilots basically got out of Dodge so fast whenever Ukrainian civilians came up to film it, is they looked into it and the avionics were still on. So the Russian pilots just abandoned the helicopter, understandably. But in the area where that came down, I believe that is now Russian occupied. So the Russians were probably taking that back to Belarus. But it's probably a catastrophic kill. They probably have to write off the entire helicopter.
Do we have any numbers right now on people or just estimates of the number of soldiers that have been taken prisoner on either side?
Could you say that again?
Do we have any estimates on both sides of the number of soldiers that have been
it's
taken?
hard to get. It's hard to get because there's different conflict. You know, I believe Ukraine has said like 4,000 Russians have been killed and only 200 Ukrainians have been killed. That's very unlikely. Going to put a big X to doubt. The Russians haven't, from my understanding, from what I've seen so far, the Russians haven't attempted to make big estimates. They've just made individual estimates about individual battles here and there. Each day, the Russian MOD puts up a list of what it says it has destroyed, but I wouldn't really trust the Russian MOD to be giving us accurate figures. But I think it's very safe to assume that we're talking about thousands killed so far. Some of the battles have been quite extensive. Some of the footage I've seen of entire columns of Ukrainian, basically battalion strength, Ukrainian columns completely wiped out, and then units of Russian troops completely wiped out as well. I would be surprised if we're talking about anything less than about 3,000 killed so far in military deaths so far. That's not including civilian deaths, which then brings up the other aspect is it seems to have finally cottoned on today, but yesterday and the first day of the invasion, I don't know if people just, they hadn't heard yet, or if they wrote it off, or if the Russian advance was so fast that they didn't realize it. But there is loads of footage of Ukrainian civilians driving right into the middle of active battlefields, and it's quite scary and it's quite disturbing. So you can bet that quite a few Ukrainian, and I mean, as we've been talking about great power politics and all this stuff throughout the stream, at the end of the day, these are innocent people. The people of Ukraine did not want this war, and now they have this war thrust upon them and they're being killed for it. So I know it's a bit moral F-slurish to say, but people are dying here, and a lot of them are completely innocent and just absent-mindedly are finding themselves caught up in the middle of engagements.
Well, the one video that you sent me yesterday of the Russian fighter plane, it must have been an attack airplane, but shooting missiles right next to a home the kids started crying. I mean, that was some really gut-wrenching.
Again, we don't know if that was confirmed Russian. I'm very surprised that a jet would fire its payload so close to the ground, but I'm not a pilot, so maybe I'm ignorant of it. We don't know what was beside that house. Was there potentially a military target beside it? Could it have been a Ukrainian jet and its missile misfired? We just don't know at the moment, but there is quite a lot of harrowing footage.
Coming in on the chat, there's a guy named Muzzle Flash, and he's saying that British anti-tank, excuse me, I just got a little bit of the hiccups, just had a bit of a snack. The British anti-tank weapons given to the Ukraine have been captured by Russian forces. Yeah. Now, again, we don't know if that's true.
That is confirmed. I've been posting that in Telegram. So for those who aren't aware,
anyone who's just joined us, and I'm going to post it again in the chat. Let's see. Do you still have it? Yeah, it is out. Michael has started himself a Telegram group that he is updating people with all of the current information that comes across his desk. And that link is in the chat right now on Felix Rex. I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to put it in Black Pigeon.
Okay.
And I'm going to put it on DLive as well.
Radio. Like I say, I'm not a public figure, so I'm probably not going to keep that Telegram account. I'll just keep it for as long as it's useful. Any footage that I come across, any updates, I'm throwing it up in there. I'll put a bit of context in the source it comes from when and as I can with stuff that comes. I'm not paying a lot of attention to it. I'm mostly putting stuff up on Instagram, but Instagram is putting all this video up on Instagram stories. It's not the best avenue for it. But I'm not putting too much up on it while I'm on the stream, because obviously I'm a bit more focused on the stream than I am on the getting the footage together. But just to go back to this, I have posted footage of what the Russians in the DNR being the Donetsk militia, one of the separatist armies. The footage looks very convincing to me. I'm willing to believe it. Is that they're capturing NLAWs. The NLAW is what the British have been supplying the Ukrainian army for the past few months. It's a fairly modern anti-tank weapon. It's developed by the British and the Swedes. The British have been handing loads of them over to the Ukrainians, and now it appears that some of those are now being captured by the Russians themselves.
Just trying to. George says he's going to be getting back on. I guess his internet dropped out on him again, but he says he'll try to rejoin.
Okay. So, well, I guess we'll fill up the time till he gets back on. The other aspect, I think I briefly touched it maybe yesterday or the first day, is the Ukrainians, if they are looking to make an effective dent in the field, because the Russian advances and the Russian forces is very armor-based. They're based around their tanks. Their tanks are leading the offensive. The Russians are using modernized T-72s. They appear to be using some modern variants of the T-80. And yesterday I seen footage of T-90s not in Ukraine, but heading towards the border from the Gomel district in Belarus and from Belgorod across the border in Kharkiv. That's a bit significant because the T-90s, from my understanding, they're mostly employed by elite Russian tank units, the Russian Guards armor divisions. So that could mean that the Russians are now deploying their elite armor into the battle. But either way, the long and short of it is Russian T-72s and the Russian T-80s, and especially the Russian T-90s, they far eclipse what the Ukrainian T-64s. So the mainstay of the Ukrainian armor that they've been putting into the fields is the T-64. These are all Soviet-based tanks, just so I'm sure most people would understand this, but obviously both countries are former Soviet republics, so their militaries are mostly equipped with Soviet-based weapons, even if they are modernized. So the Ukrainians are using the T-64. They've modernized it. It's quite an effective tank in of itself, but it is not capable of going toe-to-toe with the Russian T-72s and the Russian T-80s. So the armor advantage is very strongly with the Russians. The hope and the idea is that the Ukrainians might be able to negate that with these Western anti-tank weapons that they've got. And while there are losses that the Russians are inflicting, they're not massive from what I can see. It's a T-80 here. It's a couple of T-72s here, but it's not like columns of them. So the initiative of the battle is very strongly with the Russians. The Russians have more men, more equipment, basically better equipment. So that's why there was a big emphasis as the crisis developed in Britain, at least, is that whenever it came up on the news, is the British Secretary of Defense was constantly talking about how they were sending anti-tank weapons to Ukraine. The other aspect about this is the major arms production plants for Ukraine are based in Kharkiv. That's where their tank factory is. That's where they make their tanks. So obviously they're not going to have the time to make tanks in the middle of the war as it's gone on so far. But once that falls, is all the parts to keep their T-64s operating. It's going to be hard to keep them in the field if this is a prolonged engagement. if this goes on for weeks and months. Obviously, I'm sure NATO would pick up the shortfall in certain ways, but basically, to sum up what I'm saying is Ukrainian armor cannot go toe-to-toe to the Russians. They haven't been able to go toe-to-toe so far. They've scored some decent kills around Kharkiv whenever they really bogged down the Russians around Kharkiv, but elsewhere in the country is the Russian armor is basically sweeping the Ukrainians before them. Added to this is the Russians basically have de facto air superiority across most of the country. This is in jets. Kherson Oblast yesterday around Melitopol and Kherson. Russian Hind gunships, their Mi-24/35s, really did a lot of damage to Ukrainian columns of armor. I seen footage of an entire Ukrainian air defense unit appears to have been completely wiped out in the middle of a highway with civilian cars passing by them. A Hind helicopter, I believe the footage is in the Telegram, just completely wiped out the entire unit.
Yeah, there's been some spectacular stuff. I just want to ask the chat how my voice is sounding. Does it sound all right to you?
A bit muffled, but I can understand everything that you say. It's just not the best quality, but it is. I can deal with it.
I'm just wondering because there seems to be a lot of. That alarm is outside my house. Yeah, that was I think an ambulance that just went by.
Yeah, the air raid alarms in Tokyo are going off.
Yeah, no, that's just an ambulance or a fire truck or something that just went by my window. I'm just wondering, people, can you give me a 1 for the sound is okay, or 2, it's terrible. Well, clear but muffled.
You have someone said you have the wrong microphone selected. Might be.
No.
If you want to fiddle about with it, I'm just a bit conscious that I do have a tendency to drone on for a while, so I don't want to dominate it, but I can try and take over.
I think it's just the connection maybe of the thing, but it is an older microphone. So let's see what.
And you're gone. We've lost Felix. Hey, Felix, you I don't know if you've muted yourself or if you're taking up the mic, but I'll try and steer it straight until you and George can get back in. So, yes, so that's, as I was saying before, that's the game of play whenever it comes to tanks and aircraft in Ukraine. Strategy seems to be for the Ukrainians is to try and draw the Russians into the cities. That's where they can negate that armor advantage.
Okay, you're back. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, yours just went muffled there really badly for a while.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, so this has got to be something. I'm thinking it has to be something with the stream, like the.
Well, you're perfect for me now.
Okay, well, you went really muffled there for a while as well, so I don't know. This is bizarre. Okay, much better. Okay, can we get sorry, chat? Can we get a sound check here? A 1 for our sound is good. A 2 for it's not.
Both are great. Okay, it seems to.
Okay, because I haven't done anything. I didn't do anything. So I wonder if it's just, like you said, Ukrainian or Russian hackers or something coming after us.
Okay.
Because I haven't done anything. I didn't touch anything. I didn't adjust anything. I didn't do anything. So, and you went pretty bad there for about the last minute or so.
Oh, did I? Well, like I say, you're perfect for me. Chat seems to bass boosted.
Nah, I didn't do anything. I literally didn't. The feds are messing with the stream. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
It could just be a restream problem. Like I say, remember the previous streams we tried to do where it just was horrific. So it's probably a restream issue. Yeah. Either way, you seem to be doing okay right now, and chat seems to be okay with it. So until we get George back. But yeah, if you want to speak for a bit, like I said, I'm being very conscious. I'm kind of dominating the stream at the moment.
Oh, no, that's okay, because you're much more knowledgeable in all of these things than I am, and that's why I like to have you on for this. I'm wondering, looking at you were saying the tanks to tanks, and the manufacturing center is in Kharkov.
Yes, that's where the big tank facility is. Yeah.
And has that been attacked yet?
Yes. Actually, last night, that footage on screen right now, that is apparently the strikes on that munitions plant. Apparently, basically was blown off the face of the earth last night. So that's kind of if Russia is going down the path of demilitarizing Ukraine, they've kind of really hobbled their industry to begin with, because if that tank plant's gone, that's Ukraine's major tank. I think that's Ukraine's only tank production facility. As we were saying, pardon me, just a sorry, just had a bit of. So as I was saying earlier on, the VDV, that helicopter-borne assault on Gostomel, that took over the Antonov manufacturing plant. So that's granted, I don't believe they make military aircraft, but that's where Antonov, the big Antonov transport aircraft, that's where that's manufactured. And not only that, the world's largest aircraft, that big Antonov, the Mira, that's been captured by the Russians. Apparently it hasn't been damaged in the fighting, but the Russians have confirmed that they hold that airfield and they control that aircraft now. So the two big wings of the Ukrainian defense industry, their tank production center, well, that appears to have been completely destroyed. Their aircraft manufacturing, that's now in the hands of the Russians. And if I'm not mistaken, I also believe third-party countries, whenever they want their MiGs modernized, they send them to that field to be modernized. But that's now in the hands of the Russians.
Absolutely. And I believe we have George back with us.
Yeah, I'm back. So I missed that last part because I know Ukraine has their big airplane engine manufacturer there. And as far as the tank, production and refurbishment that they do there, are you saying that that both those locations are destroyed?
So the tank manufacturing in Kharkiv, that appears to have been completely destroyed last night. It looks like it took quite a bad beating from Russian aircraft. So the tank production in Kharkiv is very likely, because let's be honest, if the Russians are going to hit targets in Kharkiv, it's almost certainly going to be that place. That appears to have been destroyed. The Antonov works, that was taken by Russian paratroopers on the first day of the invasion, and that's now fairly deep behind Russian lines. So the Russians they hold that airfield. The world's largest aircraft, the Antonov Mira, the Russians have confirmed that they hold that was on the airfield. It wasn't damaged in the fighting, but that's now the Russians are in possession of it. And also, just to quickly sum up, this is quite significant because this isn't stuff Ukraine built up itself. Both these factories and these industries are legacies from the USSR. So if these are completely destroyed or dismantled, it's very capital intensive to build these back up. It's one thing inheriting in them from the Soviet Union and carrying them on. It's another completely rebuilding that yourself.
Just a side note, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about inflation being probably more than double what the official inflation rate is. I just like American news because America is centered around a few things, but one of them is fast food. And they're talking about how Burger King, the franchise, is cutting the number of chicken nuggets that it has in its servings as the prices for it surge. Sorry, I just had to throw that in. I apologize.
Well, the other thing that was doing the rounds was there was a clip of CNN showing footage of the Maidan Square in the center of Kiev as air raid sirens are going off, and then it immediately clipped to an Applebee's advert.
I actually, if anybody's interested in seeing that, it's on the front of my Twitter. I posted it on Twitter. I
don't know if they must. I would hope that they automate their adverts, but if they don't, I mean,
well, it was literally while the air raid was going on. Anyone who's interested can see it on the front of my Twitter. My Twitter is Navy Hatto. Yeah, so people are saying Tendi outrage. Oh no! So I just wanted to throw in a little bit of humor because this has been a pretty serious conversation. But it's just kind of funny that that's the one thing that you go on American news and that's like on the front page. Right?
Yeah.
Where are my freedom fries? It's my birthright, my freedom fries.
I guess it does kind of show how myopic American culture can be at times, kind of whenever they're reporting on. The other thing that really agitates, and again, I'll be open, I do have a very disdainful view of the United States and its influence in the world. So, right.
But that's not necessarily its people. You're talking more about like American imperial.
Yeah, the thing that really, every time I see it, I want to punch the wall, is the constant need to equate serious political issues to shitty pop culture references. Like, oh my God, like the one that got me is Putin is literally Emperor Palpatine, and the Ukrainians and everyone who oppose him are Jin Urso and the Rebel Alliance. And I was just like, I
saw the same. I saw that same article.
I want to punch a wall. It's like, oh, Putin is literally Voldemort, and it's like, is this really how you conceive of the world? Can you not conceive of geopolitical issues?
I absolutely saw it. It's like it's comparing serious issues to the Avengers or Marvel characters or stuff. No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
It really grinds my gears to fall into the trap myself, but I hate it so much. Like I don't know what I'd hate more, the Putin is literally Hitler argument or the Putin is literally Thanos argument.
Well, that's kind of funny because the Putin is Hitler. I mean, you knew that it was coming. I mean, every time there's something that goes on, some side has to become Hitler. The leader has to become Hitler. And the pictures when I was in Shibuya today were all of him with like a small mustache and the hair and whatnot. Like all these protesters today in Shibuya were, they're calling him Adolf Putin. So yeah, on their placards. I'll put that up on my Telegram, everyone. I'll put that in the chat for you. Please join my Telegram because it is definitely the most active of any social media. It's actually my preferred outlet. I like it much better than any of the others.
Once you get to the grips to it, it is quite a useful. Like I say, I've been following the invasion in real time, just mostly through Telegram accounts. Twitter is just full of misinformation from wall to wall. In Telegram, you're getting it maybe not directly from the source, but from people quite close to the source. And if you can read through what is quite obviously intentional propaganda, you can get quite good stuff off it. And like I say, all this footage that you're showing and stuff, I've gotten that all from Telegram the past couple of days.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially in this, Telegram is very popular in Russia and Ukraine. I made a post about it earlier on, I think in the Telegram group or on my Instagram. But either way, Telegram is so ingrained in Ukraine, at least anyway, is that Ukrainian civilians are using Telegram to find out what the state of fighting is in their local areas. That's how ingrained Telegram is and how expansive it is. So Twitter seems to be mostly used for, I mean, anyone who isn't banned on Twitter is kind of suspect to begin with, but apart from yourself, Felix.
Well, I mean, I actually, when I do things on Instagram, I have a more serious tone. All I ever do is I have a sort of kind of like Stephen Colbert he had when he was on the Daily Show. Like I'll post something and I'll just talk about how brave and how stunning it is and how when I basically posit moral virtue signaling. So
yeah.
Twitter is currently Dan Pop says Twitter is currently 35% Ukrainian models in army uniforms. Yeah, no, I've seen that. But the thing is, you would not believe how angry you can get Twitter by posting a pretty Ukrainian woman and then just get rolled into by thousands of very, let's just say, unattractive women. Let's just say that. But yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, can you guys hold the fort? I just gotta go to the washroom again. Be back in a sec.
Yeah, not a problem.
I back online again.
Oh, well, I'll just quickly wrap up Mitten and then I'll let George carry on. So just posted into my Telegram footage of what is purported to be a Ukrainian hind, saying that there is reports of fighting in Brody, which is in Lvov, I would pronounce it Lvov Oblast. If this is true, that's quite significant because that's quite far western Ukraine. That's approaching the Polish border. So if that is, I mean, that would be very significant. I would expect the Poles to start mobilizing their troops to sort of dissuade this.
Wait, so you're saying, well, it's Lviv, but What happened over there? Because I like I
So
said, I got
there's posts coming out showing what is purported to be a Ukrainian Hind gunship firing rocket pods. And the captions that have come with it is that this is apparently a Hind helicopter. Is that the Ukrainians are basically, there's fighting going on in Brody in Lvov Oblast.
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised. Well, like I've been saying, I'm surprised that they're doing so much action in Western Ukraine, especially Lviv, because that's so pro-Ukrainian and anti-Russian area.
They are saying, sorry, just to follow up on this, they're saying that Russian airborne units have landed in Brody. That's very significant. Once Felix gets back, we'll get a map up and we'll show you just why this is quite significant, if this is in fact actually true, because Lviv, I would pronounce it Lvov myself.
Okay.
I think that's a Polish pronunciation, but it's very far into Western Ukraine. You're approaching the Polish border at this stage.
Yeah. I dated a girl there for once, actually. I'm probably still pronounce it wrong, but yeah, I'm surprised that they do anything there. What I was wondering
if
about,
they have, I hate to interrupt again, but if they have, it's quite a bold play, because it's from where Russian troops are at the moment. That's a good 200 miles. So if they've dropped airborne troops in Brody, they must be expecting the Russian ground forces to advance 200 miles relatively soon to keep them supplied.
Right. Yeah, that would be. Yeah, that would. If you're doing behind the lines activity like that, that would be with the expectation that the line would be moving.
Even the Ukrainian telegrams are saying that the Russians have landed in Brody.
All right.
Okay, that's very significant.
What's the importance of Brody?
Pardon?
What's the it's significant that they're taking actions that far west.
Well, that's what I mean. You're getting very close to the Polish border here. That's what, maybe 75 miles, 100 miles from if even that. No, that's not. No, what is that?
Yeah.
That's about 50 miles from the Polish border. And not only that, it's about 200 miles from Russian ground troops as it stands. So it's a very bold play, whatever they're doing there.
Are they?
Are you back, Felix?
I am back. Yes, I am back.
Could you bring us up a map, because we've got quite a significant development going on?
Sure. All right, here we go. Hold on, let me just refresh it. I'm going to actually make sure I don't have my VPN on as well. Okay, good. Because a lot of these things don't seem to work properly with the VPN on. All right, here we are.
Right, let me just... could you zoom into Western... See Lviv? LV, yes, if you could zoom in there. See Brody next to it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just so chat understands the significance of this, if you could just zoom out, see that line there, that's the Polish border. And if Russian paratroopers have landed in Brody, that's very close to the Polish border. And not only that, it's quite far off from Russian land forces. So, it seemed the Ukrainians seem to say it's happened as well. So if it is, it's a very big play by the Russians. Very big, because I'm surprised they've advanced this far. I thought they'd take Kiev and maybe go for something like that, but it seems that they're going for the entire country if this is what they're doing.
Yeah, this is just right next to the Polish border, right on top of it.
And if you zoom out, If you look at that map, see where Kiev is, and look at how the distance between that as opposed to the Polish border. I mean, that's at least 200 miles, unless they're planning to invade from Belarus. But even then, that distance from the Belarusian border to there is probably another 150 miles. It's I would expect the Poles would start to mobilize. I'm not saying that. Not by any means am I saying that the Poles are going to cross the border, but the Poles would probably mobilize their army as sort of a show of strength, just to.
Definitely. I
guess we'll have to.
Yeah, I mean,
eye on that throughout the day.
With that said, I think the stream has run its course. I actually have a few things that I need to do tonight before bed as well. Is there anything you guys would like to with the chat? Because we've been going for about 2.5 hours now, about almost 3 hours. Is there anything that you'd like to say in closing to the chat?
I mean, I'm personally just going to be monitoring this as it develops throughout the day.
All right, and we'll be back tomorrow, you and I.
Potentially. What time is it in Tokyo? Is it just getting too late? Is it?
Yeah, no, it's not that. It's just that I actually have some appointments I have to deal with. Let me see. I'm gonna put out your thing once again in the chat. You might want to do it as well. George, do you have any sort of social media or anything you want to shill?
No, I'm good. We'll do it again.
Okay, cool. So I just want to say thanks everybody for being here. Very much appreciate all of the viewers that we had tonight. Some interesting questions. I'm glad to see that people are enjoying these streams. It's very much appreciated for you to just come and hear what we have to say. Hopefully we're giving out the best information we can, but hopefully it's helping you better understand what's going on in that part of the world and regionally as well. But with that said, I just want to say, everybody, thank you very much for being here. And I will see you, I guess, sometime tomorrow. So try and be there, and I'd appreciate it. Bye for now.
Yeah, speak to you soon.
All right. Ciao.